Hey y'all, it's Kate Dobrinsky from the Office of Science, and this is the Innovators Olympics Judges Training webinar. So if you're watching this, that means that you are signed up to act as one of our judges this year. So before we get started, I just want to say thank you so much for graciously and generously giving your time to this event. It means a lot to the students who are participating, and we could not do it without you. So let's get started. You may be asking yourself, what is the Innovators Olympics? So traditionally, we've always done a science fair, similar to the secondary science fair for middle and high school students. But for elementary students, we decided this year that we would take the science fair and kind of reimagine it. So we've changed the name of the science fair to be the Research Expo. And then we've also added the additional event, which is the Innovators Olympics. They're both going to be on May 9th at Annapolis High School. And basically, the Innovators Olympics is designed to engage kind of a broader array of students. So your students who participate in what was the science fair but is now the Research Expo, those kids selected one topic and they dug really deep into that topic and did all kinds of science research. And so that's going to be judged separately from the Innovators Olympics, which is designed for students who are just kind of like science generalists. You know, those kids in your class who are just into animals and plants and building things and doing chemistry experiments. Like, that's more what the Innovators Olympics is for, and it requires the kids to think on their feet. So school teams can win individual challenges, and they're also going to be collecting points in each of the challenges to try to win the overall grand award. So here's the 5 challenges. One is going to be the pasta tower. One will be a mystery powder ID. One is scientific argumentation, one is Plantapalooza, and one is forces in motion. Now we're going to go into each of these in depth and really talk about what the guidelines are for each. And before we do that, I just want to say this stuff is kind of top secret. We haven't told the students what they're actually going to be doing when they get there. So if you're a teacher at an elementary school that is sending a team, I do ask that you not go back to school in the few days between now and the actual event and tell the students what they're going to be doing, because that would be kind of an unfair advantage. So I do ask that you kind of keep that on the low. Thank you. So the rotations, there's going to be 5 rotations. You as a judge will be assigned to one of the 5 rotations. So you'll be doing one of those 5 events that I just went over. You're going to do this 5 times. And in each rotation, there's going to be 5 or 6 teams of 2 students. So there won't ever be more than 12 students in your room at a time. In the middle of the event, there'll be a 15-minute snack break. And students have been told several times that they need to bring a snack and a drink with them so that they can stop and take a little snack break, because this is kind of a long event for these elementary kids. So, judges, what are your responsibilities? This is very important. Number 1, when the students come into your rotation, you have to orient them to the challenge. So for each of those 5 challenges, I've created a short PowerPoint that just has a few slides in it that helps the kids get oriented to what they're actually supposed to be doing, like what is the goal of the challenge, and also how the challenge will be scored, and what the guidelines or what the rules are. So you have to remember, when the kids come in your room, they have no idea what they're doing, so you need to make sure that you crystal clear explain to them what the expectations are. Luckily, the PowerPoint will do it for you, but if the kids have any questions, make sure that you answer those questions for them clearly. Second, and this is kind of the obvious one, fairly score student performance. That's the whole point. Third, manage materials in your assigned challenge. So some of the challenges are going to have a lot of materials to manage, and some aren't going to have as many. So there will be multiple adults in the room. You won't be in a room by yourself. And as a rotation starts to kind of wrap up or get towards the end, you're going to want to start collecting up those materials, getting them cleaned up, and preparing for the next rotation that's going to be coming in. So there's a 5-minute transition window between each of the rotations, and I don't know that 5 minutes is necessarily going to be enough time for you to get everything organized if you're in some of the more material intensive challenges. So just be aware of the time budget we have for getting materials set up and broken down for each rotation. And of course, and probably most importantly, maintain student safety. As we say in the Office of Science, safety third. I'm just kidding. safety first. So let's talk about these challenges. The first one, challenge A, is the pasta tower. So the goal of this challenge is for students to build the tallest freestanding structure that they can build, which will be measured in centimeters. Every group will get the following materials: 1 box of spaghetti noodles, a baggie of mini marshmallows, some painter's tape, and some newspaper. So basically what's going to happen is the first thing the kids have to do is take the piece of newspaper and secure it to the ground in their workstation with painter's tape. Okay, this is to help with the management of all of the noodles and mini marshmallows going everywhere. We don't want them all over this classroom. So the students are going to have to work on this newspaper surface, and if at any time any part of their structure is built off of the perimeter, like outside the perimeter of the newspaper, then they get a 5-point deduction. And it says that in the orientation slideshow at the beginning. So the students will get a certain number of minutes to build, and all of that's in the PowerPoint for the orientation. And when time is called, all the kids have to back away. They can't continue to build after time is called. And their structure that they built must be freestanding, so it can't be held up or supported in any way. If a team finishes before time is called, they are allowed to raise their hand and ask you as the judge, if you're judging this rotation, to measure to just like go ahead and like measure their project. That's fine. But once it's been measured, that's it. It's done. It can't be measured again. So here's how you're going to score. You're going to give 1 point for every 2 centimeters. Now, I know what you might be thinking in your mind right now. Kate, wouldn't it be easier for us to just give 1 point for every 1 centimeter? Like, wouldn't that be a lot less work to figure out? Yes, but there's a reason we did the scoring this way. We did it because as I said before, the students are going to be collecting points as they go through those 5 rotations, and we don't want any of the 5 challenges to allow the students to get like 200 points or something like that, where another challenge might only allow them to get 25 or 30 points. Because if a team does really well in a challenge where they get a lot of points, then they have more of an advantage to win the whole thing. So we wanted to kind of level the playing field of how many points could be gotten in each one of the rotations. We were hovering somewhere around 50 points. So you're going to be giving 1 point for every 2 centimeters. So for example, if a student or a team's tower measures 68 centimeters, you're going to give them 34 points. Basic math. But Kate, can we record half points? What about if their tower is, 119 centimeters tall? That's fine. You would give them 59.5 points. The tallest freestanding tower wins, and if a team's tower falls at any point after time is called, half of the score should be subtracted. So let me clarify this because this is kind of a big deal. You call time, right? All the kids back away from their towers. You and your judging partner are going around measuring all the different towers. You measure a group's tower, right? You take their score down. And then at some point later on when you're measuring another team, the team that's already been measured, theirs falls down. Yes, you take half of their points away. If at any point between when time is called and the students rotate to the next station, that structure collapses, you're going to take half the points, whether they've been measured or not. If their structure after time is called collapses and you haven't measured it yet, the students can hold it up to be measured, but you're still going to subtract half of the points. So if you get assigned to this station and you want some clarification on that at all, please feel free to just hunt me down. I'll be glad to clarify for you. So here's the score sheet for the pasta tower. As you can see for each rotation, this is the score sheet for rotation 1, and all of the schools' names will already be printed in there for you. You're going to award points for height. You're going to subtract any point deductions in case they accidentally build part of their structure off of the perimeter of that newspaper. And then you're going to write what their total points are. Notice I've highlighted here, please indicate whether you circle it, highlight it, who the winning team is for each rotation. It just makes it easier for the people who are inputting the data. So that is the pasta tower challenge. Moving on to challenge B. Challenge B is a chemistry challenge, and it's a mystery powder ID. So what's going to happen is there are 6 little white powders in souffle cups, like those little plastic cups that you get salad dressing in or whatever, and the students are going to have to do tests of the physical and chemical properties of these powders to determine like what's what. They're going to have to identify them. So here's what they're going to get. They're going to get 6 mystery powders, a magnifying glass, some black construction paper, some white vinegar, and some Lugol solution, pipettes, and a properties matrix. So going back to Lugol solution, all Lugol solution really is it's a safer form of iodine, and it's a solution, so it's mixed with water, so it's safe, it's not harmful for the students, but it's a starch indicator. So when you put Lugol solution on something that has starch in it, like flour, cornstarch, paper, things like that, it will turn from a color that's sort of light orangish brown, like iced tea, into like a dark purplish black, and this happens instantly. So let's look at this properties matrix. Okay, so this matrix shows the students a ton of information. We don't expect elementary school students to automatically understand and know what reaction different powders will have to Lugol solution. So we have to provide some of this information. So it's going to show some physical characteristics like color and texture and odor. And it's also going to show some chemical properties like how it would have a chemical reaction with vinegar or Lugols. Now, we're only giving the kids 6 powders, but there are 10 powders listed on the matrix. So this is to kind of throw them off a little bit. There are some distractor powders in there. You will obviously have an answer key given to you to help you score the answers. So basically the students are going to use this information, use what observations they make by using the materials that they've been given, and they're going to try to figure out which mystery powder is which. So here's some guidelines. Again, safety first. Under no circumstances should the students ever put any of these white powders into their mouth. If you see a kid even remotely thinking about tasting a powder, this team must be disqualified from the round and be given 0 points. I know this is harsh, but tasting the powders is like a super cheat for one thing. It's super unfair. You know, like it's pretty easy to tell salt and sugar apart with your sense of taste. But also we're trying to instill in our elementary students the necessity of science lab safety. They cannot eat any of these powders. Don't start feeling bad for them because the orientation PowerPoint tells them from the jump that they are not allowed to eat any powders. So don't let them do it. And if they do, disqualify them. So the students need to keep goggles and gloves on at all times. So anytime we're working with chemicals or working with chemistry or anything that could be remotely harmful like Lugols or anything like that, plus we don't know what these powders are, we want to make sure eyewear stays on the eyes, not up here on the head. That's a fashion statement, but it's not a safety statement, okay? We want to keep them on the eyes. We want to keep gloves on our hands and all of that. Also, additionally, I didn't put this in the PowerPoint, but I did want to mention that when students are smelling the powders, you're going to want to show them how to waft to get the smell of the little powder. Okay, you don't want them sticking their nose down in there and coming up with, you know, huffing mystery powders into their nose. Okay, we don't want to do that. So make sure that you model for them that you can get the scent by moving the air over the powder towards the nose. Okay, cool. So let's look at these guidelines. Using the provided materials and information, students will make a claim about the identity of each of those 6 powders, and that you can't just make a claim in science, right? Got to have some evidence. So they have to provide 2 pieces of specific evidence. Now, what is specific evidence, Kate? Well, that's where you are going to use your best judgment as the judge. But here's some examples. We want the evidence to be specific, and we really want it to come from the matrix. So some examples of acceptable evidence would be things like it produced bubbles when it mixed with vinegar. Okay, that's something that's specifically on the matrix, and it's very obvious where the student got that information. Or another example is it turned black when it touched Lugol solution. It has a bitter odor. Each little piece is a cube. Okay, they have the magnifying glass. They can look at each of the grains of salt or sugar. It's very bright white. But some unacceptable evidence, and you know how kids can be. Sometimes they just want to give you a one-word answer. So saying, I could tell by the color, or just writing the word color is not an acceptable piece of evidence. That doesn't support the claim. It smelled weird. That's not scientifically accurate. It felt like sand. I mean, all of these are kind of ambiguous. So if they're just giving you like a one-word answer that's not specific or related to directly what's in the matrix, then you're not going to give them a point for that piece of evidence. All right, so here's how you're going to score it. They're going to get 5 points for each correctly identified powder. So just for getting the answers right, they're going to get 5 points for each of those. They're additionally going to get 2 points for each piece of evidence. But they are going to give you 2 pieces for each of 6 powders, so that's a maximum of 12 evidence points. Now in some cases, because we're dealing with some smarty pants little kids here, okay? In some cases, a tiebreaker is going to be needed. So 42 points is the maximum number of points that the students could get in this specific rotation. If you have multiple teams that turn in response sheets that are perfect, how do you determine who the first place winner is? Well, we decided to implement a tiebreaker for this one. And basically, as soon as a student is done, or a team rather, is done with their paper, they're going to raise their hand and tell you so that you can mark in what order they finished. So that means that if there's 6 teams and 3 of them have perfect scores, it's going to end up going with whoever turned in their paper first. So the top score that finishes first wins. Okay? So here's what the student response sheet actually looks like. So there's a space for each correct powder identification, and then there's 2 spaces for supporting evidence. So you can take these and actually grade them once the rotation leaves. So while the next group is working on figuring out what the powders are, you and the other judge could be sitting in the back scoring the papers from the previous session, but also keeping a lookout that kids are wearing their goggles and not eating the powders. Here's what the score sheet looks like for Challenge B. Excuse me, I didn't mention this in the first challenge, but each of the score sheets will be on yellow paper. So just so you'll be able to easily identify it in the folder. So basically, 5 points for the identified powders, a point each for the supporting evidence, total points, and the order of completion there to show you the tiebreaker. All right, moving on to Challenge C. Scientific argumentation. Now this one, the students are going to be working together as a team to come up with a 1-minute argument to support a claim, and then they're going to have to deliver that 1-minute argument to you, the judges. So here's what they're going to get. They're going to get a prompt, and the prompt is going to be some sort of question like, do you think students should go to year-round school? Or something like that. Then we're going to give them resources. So we might give them articles, data sets, charts and graphs, diagrams. It could be anything, right? And they're going to have to use these resources to help them develop their argument. They're going to like draw evidence from those to support their claim. So they're also going to be provided with a rubric. They're going to get some index cards and some paper and pencils. Here are the guidelines. The students are going to read the prompt, and they're going to look over the resources to determine what argument they're going to make. So maybe they decide that year-round school is a good thing. Maybe they decide it's a bad thing. Then they're going to work together to write a 1-minute speech in defense of their argument that's supported with evidence from the resources. But I do want to clarify that only one of the 2 students will actually be doing the speaking. So the students have to figure out amongst themselves who's going to be the speaker, but they're going to work on developing the argument together. When time is called, you and the other judge or judges will go around and collect up all of the resources so that the students who speak first aren't at a disadvantage because the people who present later had more time. The teams are going to be selected in random order, so we'll probably do like draw team numbers from a hat, and they'll have to randomly go into an adjacent room. So we don't want all of the teams hearing everybody's argument, because obviously that would be advantageous for the teams that go last. So we have 2 classrooms set up. They'll be working in one room, and then they'll go one at a time into the adjacent room to actually deliver their argument. Now, if you are judging this, this is the one rotation that I'm concern that students might have some anxiety about, because speaking to a panel of adults that they don't know is going to be anxiety inducing for some students. So I did warn schools that scientific argumentation and public speaking would be involved. So I'm hoping that they're sending kids who are not going to have a problem standing up there and looking you in the eye and telling you all about their topic. But you have to remember that these are little kids, okay? These are third, fourth, and fifth graders, and they are going to be nervous having to speak to you. So if you get assigned to this station, please make sure that you're warm, that you're smiling, that you're nodding, and you seem encouraging, even if their argument is a complete disaster, okay? Because the last thing we want at the Innovators Olympics is crying children because, you know, they had to speak in front of grown-ups. So just keep that in mind. Try to soften your face. So anyway, this challenge is going to be scored using a rubric, and the rubric will be given to the students while they're developing their arguments. And let's take a little look at this rubric. I'm not going to go through it item by item because you can read, but basically it's going to not only judge the strength of the argument and the organization of the argument, but also body language, eye contact, clarity when they're speaking. So we're looking for like clear articulation of the voice, you know, all those presentation skills. And the score sheet for this one is pretty simple. You're just going to take the rubric points from each of the teams when they present and put them on the score sheet. All right. So moving on to challenge D, we're almost there. This is the 4th out of 5. This one's called Plantapalooza, and this is a life science challenge. So what's going to happen is the students are going to be given a bag of arts and crafts materials, things like popsicle sticks, yarn, balloons, toothpicks, construction paper, tape, pipe cleaners, or I guess chenille sticks as we call them now. And they're going to get a rubric and a student response sheet. And what they're going to do is they're going to open their materials bags, and in the materials bag there's going to be a survival challenge. So it might be something like, this plant is being heavily eaten by rabbits and it needs some adaptation to protect it from predation, something like that. Or it might be, this plant lives deep under the water in the twilight zone of the ocean and needs an adaptation to help it gather more sunlight for photosynthesis. So they're gonna have a survival challenge, and they're going to brainstorm ideas for different structures that might help this plant to survive, adaptations. So then the kids are going to use the materials in the bag to make a 3D model of the plant that has the structures that they brainstormed. And just to clarify, they don't have to use all the materials in the bag. There's going to be a lot of stuff in there so that they have a nice variety. So as a judge, you do want to encourage the teams as either when you're orienting them or when you're bumping around and just kind of watching what they're doing. You're going to want to guide them back to the rubric so that they're actually looking at the rubric as they develop their model and their written response. So once they build their 3D model, they're going to draw a picture of it on that left side where it says diagram of model. And then on the right side, they're going to have to write a written response about how the structures support that organism, you know, in its environment. Now, friends, we are not judging the students on their spelling. We're not judging them on their grammar. We're not judging them on their beautiful sentence structure. We're judging them on content. So honestly, if they give you a bulleted list of adaptations and it's just an awesome bulleted list, we would want to treat that the same as we would like a really well crafted, beautifully written narrative about, you know, this plant and its adaptations. So there is a rubric for you to use to score it. Again, I'm not going to go through every little element of the rubric because you'll have a chance to look at this if you get assigned to this station. But basically, there's going to be points for how well they made the model, like how creative the model is, and then also how clear and effective their written response is. Again, the score sheet will be on yellow paper, and you're just going to take the total number of points from each of those rubrics and just pop it right there on the score sheet. And again, circle or highlight to indicate who the winning team is. So, all right, last challenge. Woo! We're here. Forces in motion. So this challenge, the students are going to have to experiment with the height and gradient of a ramp that they're given. And they're also going to have to experiment with the mass of a small toy car to try to get the car to travel the farthest distance that they can down the hallway. And here's what they're going to get. They're going to get a Matchbox car, and they're going to get some sort of flexible plastic track, and every group will get the same length and the same type. They're also going to get some marbles and some tape and some measuring tapes. And basically what they're going to do is they're going to experiment, they're going to experiment with the track. So the track doesn't have to be freestanding. The students are actually going to be holding the track. But the experimentation part is how high do I hold it off the ground, at what angle, at what slope, at like how high, how tipped up high is too high, is this too low? So they're going to experiment with this over and over again until they've gotten it to a point where the car is really getting some distance when they let it go from the top. And then they also can take the car and they can add marbles. I think we also might be providing some little blue, like what do you call those, like the little place value bits, the little blue cubes, to the students, and some tape, so they can add mass to their car so that it increases the momentum. But if you add the mass in like an off-center, like cattywampus way, it's going to make the car veer off to the left or to the right, which is going to not be an advantage. So they're going to have some time to tinker around with this and find what the best combination of ramp and mass ends up being. They're going to have about 20 minutes to tinker with the specifics, the specifications of their track and their toy car. And then at that time, you're going to call time. The students are all going to stop experimenting to make it fair. And then you're going to call the students into the hallway, 2 teams at a time. So they're going to come out. Each team's going to get 3 trials where they get to release their car from the top of the ramp 3 different times. You're going to take the longest of the distances, and that's going to be how you determine what their score is. So you're measuring from the base of the ramp to the back of the car, wherever it stops, in a straight line. So if the car comes off the ramp and veers off to one side or another, we're not measuring the actual course that it went. We're measuring base of ramp to the car, and that is clearly stated in the orientation PowerPoint. So the longest measured distance of their 3 trials is what you're going to record for them. And again, just like we did with the pasta tower, it's going to be 1 point for every 2 centimeters of distance traveled. So you're just going to take their longest recorded distance, divide it by 2, and if it's an odd number, again, you can give them a half point. So here's what the score sheet looks like. It has a place for you to record each of the 3 trials. You're just, going to maybe circle what the best trial was, divide it by 2, write it there in that right-hand column, and then highlight who the winning team is for each rotation. So that's it. Some final thoughts. Again, safety first. We really don't want anybody even remotely getting hurt at this event, because we do want it to go on year after year and kind of grow. So most importantly, y'all, well, most importantly is safety, but real close behind safety is that this is supposed to be fun. This is supposed to be something that the kids are excited about and enthusiastic about. So let's take it seriously and definitely judge fairly. But if kids start to get kind of anxious, or they're getting kind of, upset because maybe they do poorly in your rotation, in your challenge, just talk them off the ledge a little bit, coach them a little, coach them up. Tell them, hey, listen, this is supposed to be fun. You're doing awesome. You're doing a great job. Lighten up. So this is the first year, and I definitely am going to want some feedback from you as we move forward with this for next year. So please, I'm sure there'll be an evaluation for you to do. At some point, I'm sure I'll send out some sort of survey. Please give me your feedback. You're not going to hurt my feelings. We are definitely, this is our initial pilot year, and I need your feedback. So with that being said, thank you so much for offering to judge the Olympics. I'm so grateful to you for this. If you have any questions at all about anything, comments, concerns, you can email me. I am kdobrinsky@aacps.org. Final reminder that this is happening this coming Wednesday, May 9th at Annapolis High School, and I do ask that you please be there no later than 3:30 p.m. So student registration starts at 3 o'clock. So if you get there at 3:30, there are already probably going to be kids there in your room. We have some high school volunteers coming from Annapolis High School and from Glen Burnie High School to kind of help supervise and get the kids, where they need to go. But I really, really must emphasize that you please be there by 3:30 because we're going to start rolling with the opening orientation at 3:45. So whoever's judging with you, your judging mate, would greatly appreciate you to be there. Sorry. And also light dinner will be provided for you. So we'll probably do like box sandwiches or something like that, but we will feed you. So again, thank you so much. Please email me if you have any questions, and I'll see you Wednesday.